And it wasn't until I realized you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it. And once you find that that is what you can control, that is your power.
Oh, that was so good. I feel like it's so, again, these things are so simple, but they're so complex. And so many people have shared their stories on this podcast, and they've dealt with really, difficult, shocking, unfortunate, not fair kind of things that they didn't choose. It was chosen for them, or something tragic happened that they weren't expecting. And almost to a person, they have said, I'm glad that happened. I wouldn't want it for my loved ones. I wouldn't want it for my kids. I wouldn't want it for my best friend. I wouldn't want it for my partner. I wouldn't have wanted it for me. But had it not happened, I would not be who I am. And I'm a better version of me. And now I can help other people. And that is so much what you've done, is that you've taken your experience and you've kind of taken these two paths. You've educated people about stroke and kind of broken down that stereotype, but also you've been really vulnerable about what you learned about yourself. Was that, then that was a choice you made. You didn't have to, you could have just been an advocate for stroke awareness, but this other part of you, this vulnerable part that makes you emotional today talking about it, you decided to share that. Why?
Well, I think stroke survivors, we live in a different world than the rest of society. And I don't think people really understand what it's like to be a stroke survivor. And so I told myself, I'm just going to be really honest with my followers, with everybody. Because I know some people, they say, oh, I had a stroke, or I'm angry, or I just really want to be honest with people. And the stroke is devastating. And it did change my life upside down. And I can't pretend that I'm okay. I want to be real and authentic when I talk about my stroke or share my story.
Thank you. It is through sharing authentic stories that people make connections, and that people can learn from each other, and we can have new understandings. And I really appreciate how open you've been and how honest you've been, because as I mentioned earlier, I think the stroke, there's important things that we all can learn about stroke awareness and the health part of that. And then there's the other part that is the before and after. And if you're someone listening who hasn't had that moment, something happened to you and you were forced to be different, I think the challenge is you don't need that moment to take a look at yourself and to analyze your relationships and to analyze your mental health and to analyze your perspectives, and are you pleasing people at the sake of your own well-being? But for you, LeeAnn, that was forced on you, and you had to think about your new life post-stroke. And we're going to take a break, and then I want to talk more specifically about the book. And I want to mention the book. It's Every Stroke Survivor Has a Warrior Within. We'll put a link on the website to the book. But I want to talk specifically about the limitations, because you've talked kind of broadly about them, and you've said your whole life turned upside down. And I've read your story, and I know I mean, everything changed. So we're going to talk about that right after this. LeeAnn has been sharing with us about her reality of how her stroke changed her life, and not just the limitations that she physically had, but she's spoken quite openly and vulnerably about the way that her mindset changed and her relationships changed and how she decided to embrace her full self and be honest, which all of us can connect with those. I want to take a minute now and shift the conversation to talk about specifically the stroke limitations, LeeAnn, and what those of us who haven't had that happen to us, what advice do you have for us about responding to folks who have had strokes? What do we need to know about our biases that are wrong, and how you've had to just change your life completely, where you live, what your work is, all of that. Let's talk specifically about what the stroke did physically and what we can learn from that.
I have spasticity, and numbness on the right side of my face, even my eyeball, which is really interesting.
And again, like to the bias thing, for folks who aren't watching this on YouTube, talking with you, I would not know. I think there's this bias that like this part of the face is completely like paralyzed or droopy or something, and I would not know.
I know. I mean, and I mentioned that in my book, like, you would never know with me sitting talking to you that I had a stroke. But it's what's going on inside of stroke survivors is what you don't see. I have numbness, like I said, and then the right side of my lips are not 24/7 numb. So sometimes my articulation is not that great. I have spasticity all down my arm and into my leg. And spasticity is when your brain doesn't give the signal to your spine to release your muscles, to relax them. So my muscles are always contraction. And with that comes pain. So I live in constant pain, everything. I lost the ability to run. I walk with a limp, and I don't really have use of my right hand due to tremors. So I got tremors, and the thing with stroke, it's not a linear thing. It's this crazy journey that I've been on, because 6 months into my recovery, I was going up. I really thought that I was going to gain everything back. And then 6 months later, I developed these horrible tremors and excruciating. Well, I had brain surgery. So coming out of brain surgery, let me just tell you, I never ever want to feel that level of pain again. But the pain that I have now is pretty high. When my followers share their stories, and a lot of them are young, and that's why I want to get the word out that, when it happened to me, I didn't even know what the signs were. When you get weakness and my speech kind of slurred, and, I fell down and I couldn't get back up. A lot of my followers, you look at them and they look completely normal. But inside, some of them, they have fatigue. And I have one follower where it's like she has a battery life of 4 hours. And then she sleeps, and that is her life. She's got 4 hours every day to do something. And then it's sleep. And you have to learn how to adapt. There's a lot of people who have sensory issues, where I had it when I first had my stroke, where my family, they took me to a restaurant, and my brain, it was just too much. The music, the people, the crowd. I was like, I have to go home, and they didn't understand why. And I couldn't articulate at the time that my brain just can't do it. And I have lots of followers who it's really hard for them to navigate into the normal world because it's too much stimulus for their brain.